The train didn't arrive so much as it screamed its way into Ember Creek, metal shrieking like something wounded and furious, belching dark smoke into the frozen February sky. Wind knifed across the platform, sharp enough to sting skin raw, daring anyone foolish enough to linger. Most of the passengers hurried off toward town, chasing lamplight and warmth before night could clamp its jaws shut. One figure did not hurry. She stepped down from the last car alone, boots striking the iced boards with a dull, hollow sound. She carried nothing at all. No suitcase, no satchel, no waiting arms. Only a thin shawl pulled tight around narrow shoulders and a bonnet drawn low, hiding most of her face. She might have been 20 by the calendar, but the way she stood told a stranger she had already lived. Too much and been spared too little, balanced between exhaustion and stubborn survival. The station master leaned from his booth, collar turned up against the cold. "Miss," he called, not unkindly, "that's the last train tonight. Town's half a mile. Best get moving before it turns meaner." She turned toward him, and the sight made him hesitate. Pale skin stretched tight over fine bones. A bruise bloomed deep purple along her jaw, half hidden beneath the bonnet. Another shadowed mark, older and yellowing, near her temple. Her green eyes held the panicked stillness he'd seen in trapped animals. "Thank you," she murmured, voice thin but steady, and started toward town. Ember Creek was not a gentle place, even under the best of suns. Tonight, with ice swirling through the air and shadows crawling long across the street, it looked openly hostile. The saloon roared with light and noise, laughter spilling out with whiskey fumes into the cold. The general store was locked tight, the schoolhouse dark. Only Mrs. Morrison's boarding house showed lamplight behind drawn curtains. She'd made it barely halfway when trouble stepped into her path. "Well now," a voice slurred, amused and sharp-edged. "What wandered in here?" 3 men peeled away from the saloon's glow, boots scuffing snow. Jake Harmon led them. Broad-shouldered, mean-eyed, a man who drank to forget and remembered only how to hurt. "Don't recall ordering entertainment from the city," he said, looking her over. She stopped, fingers clutching the ends of her shawl until her knuckles whitened. "I'm looking for Mrs. Morrison's boarding house," she said softly. "Are you?" Jake took a step closer. His friends drifted wide, hemming her in like predators. "We know warmer places," he said. "All you need is to be friendly." He reached for her arm. She recoiled so hard she nearly lost her footing. Her bonnet slipped, exposing the full bruise along her jaw. Jake's smile twisted. "Looks like someone already had a go at you." Her breath came quick and shallow. Doors stayed shut up and down the street. Ember Creek had learned to mind its own. "Step back." The voice came from the dark gap between buildings, calm and low-edged, with something that made men listen. Jake froze. A tall man stepped into the lamplight, moving like he belonged there. Lean muscle beneath a long dust coat, hat brim low, a colt riding easy at his hip. Too easy. The air itself seemed to shift. Ethan Rain. "This ain't your concern," Jake snapped, but he'd already eased back a step. "I said step back." Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It carried the certainty of a man who had survived worse than drunken bravado. Jake spat into the snow. "Wasn't nothing. Just being neighborly. Be neighborly somewhere else." Jake shot the girl one last look, a promise saved for later, then shoved back into the saloon. The door slammed, cutting off the noise like a blade. The girl sagged but stayed upright through sheer will. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan studied her, the bruises. The way she held herself like pain was an expectation. He'd seen that before. "Morrison's is closed," he said. "Flu. She's been down days." Her shoulders slumped. "There's a hotel," she began. "2 streets over," he finished, not adding what he knew about that place after dark. She nodded, turning uncertainly. He watched her take 3 steps, sway, brace herself against a post. Something inside him shifted, something he'd buried years ago. "Wait." She turned, hope and fear tangled in her eyes. "You ride?" he asked. She blinked. "Yes." Ethan whistled, sharp and sure. A massive black horse emerged from the shadows. He swung into the saddle and offered his hand. "You can try your luck at the hotel," he said. "Or come with me." "I don't even know you," she whispered. "Ethan Rain, ranch 5 miles north." Big house. Empty rooms. You'll be safe. He paused. Safer than here. She looked at his hand. Staying meant Jake Harmon. Running meant nowhere. I don't have money. Didn't ask. Silence stretched thin as ice. Then she placed her trembling hand in his. He pulled her up behind him. She held on so lightly he barely felt it, though he could feel the shaking. Hold tight, he said. Moonlight washed the frozen ground as they rode. Behind them, laughter faded. Ahead, land opened wide and cold. Her grip tightened now and then, a silent question. When the dark outline of the ranch rose on the hill, he said, Almost there. She didn't answer, but she leaned closer, and for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Rain wondered if the empty rooms waiting ahead were about to change. Dawn crept slow over Rain Ranch, brushing pale gold across the hills. Ethan had been awake since before light, moving through chores by habit alone. Feed, water, mend, anything to delay going inside, to avoid thinking about the girl sleeping under his roof. When he finally entered the kitchen, the smell stopped him. Warm food. She stood at the stove, wrapped in a blanket, stirring porridge like she belonged there. Morning, she said softly. You should be resting. I have. She set a bowl before him. I used what you had. He noticed how she kept the table between them, how careful her movements were. In daylight, her bruises were worse. Your coffee's awful, she said suddenly. He blinked. It always is. I can fix that. Almost a smile touched her lips. They ate in quiet that wasn't awkward, just new. She ate quickly, like someone used to scarcity. Her eyes kept flicking to the door. You need a name, she said. You can tell me when you're ready. She looked down. Ruth, that your real one? It's a name, she said. That's enough. It'll do, he replied, and relief softened her shoulders. Outside later, he fixed boards on the barn, catching glimpses of her moving through rooms, cleaning with purpose, breathing life into a house long dead. When she stepped into the yard and drew water, the wind tugged loose curls free. Quiet, pretty, the kind that crept up on a man. She caught him watching. Neither looked away. By afternoon, he found her frozen in the parlor doorway, staring at his wife's sewing basket, his daughter's toys. I didn't know, she whispered. They wouldn't want dust, she said gently. He couldn't speak. She cleaned while he stayed away, her soft humming seeping into old grief. When he returned, the room was changed, still theirs, but no longer a wound. Thank you, he said. They were loved, she answered. That night, storms rattled the windows. She flinched at thunder. They sat by the fire. My father did this, she said later, voice bitter. I ran. Will you keep running? He asked. No, she whispered. She fell asleep by the fire. He covered her, stayed awake, and felt something warm stir where there had only been cold. Outside, rain washed the world clean. Inside, Ethan Rain felt the first fragile hint of something like hope. The fever came without ceremony, like an ambush laid by a body that had finally decided. It could no longer pretend to be strong. One moment Ruth was outside, sleeves rolled, pinning Ethan's shirts to the line while a restless March wind tugged at her skirts, the sun warm enough to feel like a promise. The next, the ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. Heat flooded her veins, sudden and merciless. Her vision blurred at the edges, the sky washing white. She steadied herself on the post, blinking hard. Just dizzy, she whispered, though no one stood near enough to hear. She took a step toward the house. Her legs answered slowly as if wading through deep water. Each breath felt thick. By the time she reached the kitchen door, her fingers were numb and her head rang. Inside, the familiar quiet pressed in. Just need to lie down, she murmured, gripping the wall. The stairs rose before her, impossibly far. She turned instead toward the parlor, toward the chair by the hearth that had become her refuge. Almost there, almost. Her knees buckled. The world rushed up and vanished. Ethan came in hours later, shoulders aching, hands raw from fence work. He stopped short at the sight of half-hung laundry snapping in the wind. Ruth never left things unfinished. Ruth, he called. No answer. A chill slid down his spine. He found her crumpled beside the chair, hair damp, skin pale, burning hot beneath his touch. For one terrifying heartbeat, memory tried to steal his breath, but she was warm. Too warm. Ruth, he said urgently, lifting her. Her eyes fluttered. Ethan, I'm sorry. The wind. Hush, he murmured. I've got you. He carried her upstairs, heart hammering. She whispered of cold, of his room being warmer. He laid her on his bed, changed her clothes with careful hands, every movement measured, respectful. He built the fire high, fetched water, cooled her skin. Time blurred. She drifted in and out, murmuring, flinching from things only she could see. Don't let him take me, she pleaded once, tears sliding down her temples. Ethan took her hand, held it firm. It's me. You're safe. I won't let anyone take you. He stayed through the night, through every shuddering breath. By dawn, he looked like a man dragged back from the edge himself. Ben Cooper appeared in the doorway, drawn by smoke and instinct. Lord, Ben breathed. She's burning up. He rode for the doctor. Martha Cooper arrived like a force of nature, blankets and orders in tow. Sit, she snapped at Ethan. You'll fall over? I'm not leaving her. You will for 2 hours, Martha said, not unkindly. She needs you standing. The doctor's verdict was cautious. Hope. Exhaustion. Too much running. Too little rest. She'll live, he said. Those words carried Ethan through the longest wait of his life. When Ruth finally woke clear-eyed, he felt his chest loosen. You stayed, she whispered. Every minute, tears gathered, soft and grateful. No one ever did. I'm not no one, he said. Weeks followed, slow and bright. Spring settled in. Ruth healed, laughter finding its way back into her voice. The house filled with sound again. Then the rider came, badge flashing, and fear reared its head one last time. Ruth upstairs, Ethan said quietly. She obeyed until she didn't. When she stepped out to face the deputy, she stood taller than he'd ever seen her. My name is Ruth Rain, she said, steady as iron. The deputy argued, threatened. Ethan stood his ground. Ben's rifle spoke without words. When the man finally rode away, the silence left behind felt like release. Ruth sagged, shaking. What have I done? What you needed to, Ethan said. Will you marry me? She asked, voice barely above a breath. His answer was not spoken. The wedding came quick and simple. Ruth Rain stood beside him, eyes bright. As seasons turned, they rebuilt everything. The ranch, the house, the broken places inside themselves. On the porch one evening, she asked if he was happy. He pulled her close. I am now, she smiled. So am I. Spring deepened into something rich and full, the kind that crept into the bones and made even old wounds ache a little less. Rain Ranch changed by inches and moments rather than grand gestures. Fence posts stood straighter. Windows stayed open longer. The kitchen no longer smelled of scorched coffee and loneliness, but of bread, stew, and something sweet baking slow. Ruth moved through the house with growing confidence. Her steps lighter each day, her laughter no longer surprised when it escaped her. Ethan watched all of it from a careful distance at first, afraid that if he named the feeling growing in his chest, it might vanish. He had learned long ago that good things could be taken without warning. They lived like two people learning a new language together. Cautious, attentive, generous with patience. Nights were quiet but no longer empty. They slept on opposite sides of the bed at first, space between them wide as memory allowed. Sometimes Ruth would startle awake, breath sharp, and Ethan would murmur her name until the tension left her shoulders. He never reached for her unless she reached first. That mattered more than words. In the mornings, they worked side by side. Ruth learned the rhythms of the ranch, the moods of the animals, the way Ethan liked things done without ever saying it aloud. Ethan learned the small tells that meant she was tired, or thinking too hard, or remembering something she wished she could forget. When the piano was tuned and finally played again, the sound filled the house in a way that felt almost sacred. Ethan would stand in the doorway, hat in hand, listening as if afraid to breathe too loudly. Sometimes the songs were lively. Sometimes they were slow and aching, and he knew better than to interrupt. Town took notice, as towns always do. Whispers followed Ruth when she came into Ember Creek with Martha for supplies. Some curious, some unkind. She met them all with quiet composure, chin lifted, hand steady on Ethan's arm when he walked beside her. No one challenged her name again. The judge never came himself. Letters did, thick with threat and authority, each one answered by silence. Summer arrived with heat and dust. One evening, after a long day mending fence under a brutal sun, Ethan came in to find Ruth standing at the table, reading a letter she hadn't known how to hide. Her face was pale, hands shaking. "He says he'll keep coming," she whispered. "That I belong to him." Ethan took the paper, read it once, then folded it carefully. "You belong to yourself," he said. "And here if you choose." She looked at him then, really looked, as if seeing the man beneath the protector. "I choose this," she said. That night, the space between them disappeared. It wasn't rushed or desperate. It was careful, reverent, two people laying old ghosts to rest one touch at a time. When morning came, Ruth lay with her head on his chest, listening to a heartbeat that no longer felt lonely. Trouble did not vanish entirely. It rarely does. A stranger passed through once, asked too many questions. Ethan answered with his eyes more than his words. The man left. Another time, Jake Harmon crossed paths with them in town, sober and sullen. He said nothing, but the look he gave Ruth made Ethan's hand drift close to his gun. Jake turned away first. Life settled into something solid. Ruth planted a garden that flourished. Ethan taught her to ride the rough trails beyond the ridge. They argued once quietly about the past, about what might come back to find them. They learned how to disagree without fear. One night, sitting on the porch while cicadas sang, Ruth rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "I don't run anymore," she said. He kissed the top of her head. "Neither do I." Autumn arrived quietly, the way it always did on the high plains, slipping into the mornings with frost and leaving gold in the afternoons. The ranch settled into a steady rhythm that felt earned rather than borrowed. Ruth moved through the days with an ease that still surprised her sometimes, as if she kept waiting for the ground to give way beneath her feet. It didn't. The house stood firm. Ethan stood firmer. She learned the land the way one learns a trusted friend, by paying attention. Where the wind came hardest, which fence post always leaned no matter how often it was set right. Where the horses liked to stand when the sun dipped low. Ethan watched her find her place without claiming it, and something in him eased every time he caught her humming while she worked. The past did not disappear, but it loosened its grip. Letters from Judge Wells stopped coming. Word reached town that he had bigger troubles to tend, reputation cracking under the weight of his own cruelty. Ruth listened to the news in silence, then went back to kneading bread. That was how she measured victory now. One evening, as the first snow teased the hills, Ruth sat at the piano, fingers moving with a confidence that had once been buried. Ethan leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, hat forgotten on the hook. He realized then that the sound filling the room no longer carried sorrow. It carried belonging. Later on the porch, wrapped in a blanket and the quiet, Ruth spoke without looking at him. "I used to think love was something you endured," she said. "Something you paid for." Ethan took her hand, rough thumb brushing her knuckles. "I used to think it was something you lost." She turned to him, eyes bright in the lantern light. "Turns out it's something you build." Winter came hard, but the house held warmth. They worked, argued lightly, laughed more. Sometimes Ruth still woke from dreams, but she no longer woke alone. Sometimes Ethan stood at the grave on the hill and spoke to Sarah and Emma, telling them about the woman who had saved him without trying. When spring returned again, it found a place that no longer felt haunted. On a clear morning, standing where the road dipped toward Ember Creek, Ruth watched the horizon and felt nothing pulling her away. Ethan came up behind her, arms circling her waist. "You ready?" he asked. She smiled, steady and sure. "I already am." The wind moved across the plains, not hunting now, just passing. Through. And in a house that once held only grief, two lives moved forward together, not because they were afraid to be alone, but because they had chosen each other, again and again without running.